How's that? Yeah, there we go. Everything is perfect. I was going to show you, this is B-Girl Tara. I'm not going to do it right now just for time concerns, but like Google, YouTube, B-Girl Tara. She's 6 years old right here and just annihilates a 10-year-old kid. He comes out and he knows he's losing and she's out dancing him. And she's like, no, I'm not done killing you. But we're not going to do that because we're going to talk about some other shit. So to that end, hi. Oh, okay, that's feeling a little bit good. All right, I like, yeah. All right, I got the temperature. I'll tell you what, though, we're going to bring that shit up. We are going to bring that shit up. But that is on me. That is not on you. You're going to come with me, and we're going to see where that energy gets to. My name is Lemon, and I make websites. I've been making websites for a very, very long time. It is still something I do because it is still something I enjoy. The day that I stop enjoying making websites is the day that I go, how much are they paying me for this shit again? And did I learn any other skill? Okay, so I'll probably not stop making websites because there's only one thing that I've figured out that people will actually pay me for that I'm all at. But I love the changing dynamic of it, and I love the freedom. The thing that continually makes me delighted and impressed and surprised about the internet is how how unmoderated it is, and how you can just have a stupid idea, as you know, I've had many, like have a stupid idea and deliver on that stupid idea in a weekend. So I work at a company called Sass Labs, where my job title is now the front-end development director. So that means, you know, management, right? And so generally that means mentoring, shepherding, documenting. So I have a team of developers underneath me who I am trying to help write semantic code and write performant code that delivers to client expectations but without some sort of weird morass. And I think that one of the things that's surprising to me and educational to me is how when people come out of situations and I don't know if this is a Polish thing, but it is very an American thing, these boot camps where people are like, learn how to build a website in 14 days. And they come out, it's like, well, you learned, how to use a hammer, but boy, you don't know how to make a website yet. So I'm a very serious professional. And to demonstrate that, here's a picture of me in my pajamas playing some VR game. I believe this is the one where you were you had to work at a cash register while you had a gun. So anyway, I want to tell you a true story. This is a true story of something that happened to me about 9 years ago. So, like I said, I'm somebody that makes websites for fun and for money, and I wanted to do the second thing. So I was just at this point, gigging and going around to just, companies that were looking for websites, and ran into this one. And they wanted to give me a contract because they were like, we know your skill set, this is what we need. And basically what we got is okay, so we have legacy software platform. It's built on Ruby on Rails. It has a whole lot of problems, both visually and with general reliability. We want to build a new platform, take out the whole thing, when I redo this whole thing in .NET, and you're going to do the front end, and hopefully this will work out pretty good. This contract was a month and a half. They wanted an entire new front end for an existing legacy piece of software that they wanted to rebuild in a month and a half. And I was like, all right, I will deliver to your specifications. I will deliver to the specifications of what you want, which meant that I'm going to build a front end. And I did it in Bootstrap and Knockout. I'm guessing not a lot of you are familiar with this thing anymore. This was a fucking mistake. That's not my favorite technology in the world, but it's viable. But it worked. The whole thing worked. We had a deliverable concept the clients were able to use within about 3 months. And that's exciting. But then the next part happened. And the next part was that they were like, hey, do you want a job? And I was like, yeah, okay, yeah. I've been enjoying this thing. I'm enjoying this company, and yeah, I'll work here full time. Oh, shit, I have to maintain this software? Oops, I didn't build this right. Uh-oh. So that became my problem. Is anyone here named Jeff? No? I thought maybe that was the case, which is good, because this is Jeff. And this Jeff concept that to introduce you to, because Jeff is somebody that likes to overcomplicate things. And so when you see this picture, and by the way, this man does not exist. This photo was taken off of this person, does not exist. But when you're seeing this man, when you're seeing the Jeff, just know that Jeff is your enemy. Let's keep that in mind. Moving on, let's talk about frameworks. There's a whole bunch of them. People are writing and then deprecating ones every day. It's very exciting. So like, for example, there's the need of a client that'll say like, well, we need to do a new website. And it's like, all right, cool. Let's have like a 3-week-long discovery phase to decide what framework we're going to use for your website. We don't need that, Jeff. And this talk is about trying to get through that amount of over-engineering to actually what is the deliverable, how do we get to that the fastest without some sort of over-engineered framework. Like Bootstrap. Bootstrap was something that was developed by Twitter back in whatever. And it was originally a float-based layout. Bootstrap was serving a purpose before CSS Grid came out, that everything was done in floats, and floats fucking suck. And so they were like, well, let's write code that sucks so that we can, you know, make those things marry together. That was the origin of it. There's Foundation, which is another framework, sort of looks similar to Bootstrap. You'll run into Foundation a whole bunch. And that's basically CSS and vanilla JavaScript. There's Cirrus, which is one that I've actually kind of like the look of. It's bigger and sort of fatter gradient only, but specifically is a CSS only framework, which I enjoy. Element Plus is a Vue 3 framework, which is Chinese. Well, I mean, God, okay, there's Material. Like, Material could be done in React, or it could be done in Angular, or it could be done in Vue, or it could be done in just Sass and JavaScript. And Material is one thing that very much in visual capacity kind of ate a whole lot. Because it's like, well, Google did it. And so if Google did it, that means they tested it. And that means everyone likes it. Because every product you've ever used that Google owns, you go, perfect. And then you go, hey, this product that I'm using that Google owns, they won't just kill it off at some point, will they? No, they won't. They will never do that. Carbon is a design system made by, this isn't the GitHub one, this is the IBM one. It's available for all of the React, Vue, Angular, but realistically, it's actually just React. You've got Primer, which is the CSS-only framework made by GitHub. It's what powers everything on github.com. God damn it, are there more? You've got Metro UI, which is the one that's based on that Windows 8 theme. Montage, Onsen, YUI is the one that Yahoo made back when they were a viable company. Topcoat, Jeet, Kickstart, et cetera, et cetera. Oh, some of these are actually deprecated. That list will get bigger over time. There's a thing that I think about specifically in the concept of frameworks, is that frameworks are good, and especially if you're doing something that's like really high velocity, especially like proof of concept things, working within a framework and working within those constraints of those things that are already established is great because you can build enough momentum. But the thing is that I feel like there is a triangle here of like velocity, but that velocity is at the expense of performance and adaptability. These packages, especially some of the heavier like material packages, are hundreds of megabytes before you've started coding. And no, of course, not all of that is going to go down to the browser, but you have to dig through all of those files and figure out where everything is. I kind of want to be over here as much as I possibly can. I like to build performant sites, and I also think that things are going to change because clients and bosses are always going to change minds. I want to make sure that I can work with them. So to that end, this is emphatically not a talk about frameworks. Many frameworks exist, as we've just seen. If you want to choose any of them and go with them and you like them, that's kick-ass. I love that for you. But this is not about frameworks. This is a talk about HTML and Sass. And specifically, I want to say that when I mean Sass, I actually just pretty much mean CSS. That like, Sass, especially now, is a convention that code a little bit faster in a lot of cases because you can do nesting and you can do variables in a different way, and you can cross-compile that down to keep yourself from writing redundant code. I basically always write in Sass because it's more ergonomic for me. I can get more code written, but that's not to say that literally any of this is Sass dependent. Nothing I'm going to show you is specific to Sass. I'm just demonstrating it as Sass as a way to make it a little bit more cognizable with a little bit less code. And those are all the things I said. So first thing I want to introduce you is the concept of like viewport units, because there's many different ways to like measure a div. Any sort of box you want to put on screen, you can say like, well, you know, that's got a width of a certain amount, and like maybe that's a width of 500 pixels. That's easy enough to do. You open up the Figma, you against 50% of the container. A little bit complicated because 50% of the container a whole bunch of different things, but that's totally valuable. EMs and REMs are something that is really useful, especially in the case of like paragraph texts, because if you've got 16-point font and a nice big old monitor, and the line length goes from here to here, you've lost me on the first. So you want to get something around the range of like 60 to like 80 letters across the actual line. Rems and Ms are different because they're whether or not it's about the root element or the comparative element. And then we've got a grid-specific thing we're not going to even talk about. But there's also VH and VW, and DVH and DVW. So this is the concept of, hey, computer, how big are you? And I want 50% of that. I want 60% of that. If that changes, change my value. Whatever 100% of the height is, go ahead and use that. So like a good demonstration of this is, hey, we like that Apple design where like the whole screen is just a single slide. When you slide, you can see the other slide. Like, okay, awesome, I can do that in like, Jeff, shut up, Jeff. We are not writing a goddamn line of JavaScript to make this work. What we're actually going to do is we're going to say, we've got a main, we've got a section, we're going to say all of those sections, I want you to be a height, minimum height rather, of 100 viewport height. And with that code and that, we can make this thing. So our stripe is 100% VH, and this next stripe is 100% VH. Next stripe is 100 VH, and if I change the actual size of my display, 100 VH is going to change with it. So, I mean, fine, that's okay. That's okay, but we can make that a little bit fancier. So we did this in order to get some like vertical alignment, that little bit of text in the middle. Like, what we could also do is we could do this next line, scroll, snap, style, align, start. And so that's saying, okay, so all of my frames are actually going to be 100% of the height, but crucially, this is a touchscreen monitor, so I'm going to go up here, and I'm going to let go. Oops. I'm going to let go, and it's actually going to scroll snap. This is something that's native to CSS and has been native to CSS for quite a while. So you can actually say tolerance levels. Like, I want it so that when somebody scrolls kind of close enough to the actual viewport, that it's going to snap, and that scroll is going to be succinct. And this works so much better than something that actually is JavaScript controlled, because it's actually aware of the user's movement rather than doing a recalc on the screen. Because kind of any time that you're writing JavaScript that's something that's to scroll, you're going to have jank, because it has to do so many recalculations in such a short amount of time. That jank is definitely going to happen. Next up, okay, that's nice, but like, we want to have the background, and like the background should be, well, we want parallax. That's what the client says. We want parallax. Parallax is cool. Okay, got it. We need, shut up, Jeff. Shut up, Jeff. We do not need JavaScript for this. We're simply going to say, we're going to take our code that we already have, going to add the concept of a background to it. We're going to add a background size, centered and covered, and then we're going to add a before element that's going to be like a nice gradient. And with that code and that code alone, we've got our HTML. There's our picture. There's our content. We've got this little inner box. And then we've got this concept. These are actual quotes from DJ Khaled. Smart guy, you'll see more of them. In all of these cases, like we've got these pictures which are just taken off of Unsplash, and we can scroll, and as we're scrolling, those pictures are going to say where they are, and the content is going to go where it is. But also, that content gets to be as much as it is. So like this thing is bigger than an actual viewport, like with the padding in there, but our picture is going to know to stay fixed because we use background attachment fixed, and we just put this gradient on top for a nice little effect. Moving into the concept of grid layouts, we've got, client says to me, hey, we want to build a new website. It's going to have a top nav, it's going to have a, shut up, Jeff. I knew Jeff. We don't need you. We don't need you because we know what a website looks like, man. A website looks like there's a header, there's an aside, there's a main, there's a footer. We can do this in seconds. So what we're going to say is, I want to make a layout, and my layout is going to be 2 columns. My first column is going to be 260 pixels exactly. My second column is going to be whatsoever left over there. And then we're going to say that our header and our footer, right? You can imagine them, a header and a footer. We're going to say that we've got a 2-column layout, but this header and the footer span over both. And with that and that alone, like we've got that. Because first column, here's our second column, and then our top nav and our footer are both spanning those 2 columns. So, man, we can start working. We also could have done this, though, because there's another way that you can identify grid layouts, is you can actually say, rather than the concept of columns and rows, you're going to go, well, I want to define what an area looks like, and I want to say that an area is like header, header, aside, main, footer, footer. If you're doing something that's kind of small and dirty and will be up faster, this probably not the way for you, because you're going to kind of just want to define like what a column looks like. But if you're doing something that has larger architecture, that has other front-end developers touching it, this is kind of a thing to just set waypoints of like what all of these grid areas mean, because then you can just start writing this kind of thing arbitrarily in different files and know that whatever assertion is here, that's going to get thrown into those defined grid areas. Glossary that we're going to have at the end of this talk. I mean, obviously, I'm going to share this deck. You can take pictures if you want, but just know if I'm speeding through, if there's things that you want to touch back on, you can go back into there. Repeating grids are something that, boy, it happens so much. We got a client that's like, okay, we got a website layout. That's awesome. We want to blog a bunch of blog teasers, right? So there's going to be an image. There's going to be a headline. Maybe there's some tags. I don't know. There's stuff. I don't think there's going to be, and it doesn't have to be responsive. You've seen this hundreds of times before. There's the news section, and our news section is going to be card. Okay. Okay. Stop it, Jeff. Stop it, Jeff. We have a designer. The designer sent us a design, so we are in better shape than we were in the start. So this is what you're looking for. We got this little fun offset thing here on the top. That's kind of cool. And then we've got our articles with our names. That's all fine. And then our mobile views down to here. All right. Awesome. We can put that together in a couple of lines of Sass to go, okay, so we got our HTML. We're going to have an article, class card. And then we're going to say, okay, I want you to do a grid, put a nice row gap and a column gap so that we've got space. I'm going to define those separately from each other because as you can see, there's like more of a gap this way than there is this way. So we're going to kind of define our row gap and our column gap differently. And then we're just going to kind of write some breakpoints. I want 3 columns at this width, 2 columns at this width, blah, 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 blah. Okay, and now we end up with this. So we didn't write a whole lot of Sass to get here, but we do have like a proper responsive layout. We don't have to write some sort of like big old media query container to consider what this is going to look like at all these breakpoints. We're just going to say, here's some general rules, and just change the number of columns. And that's all you need to do. But we can keep going on this because we can look at that and go, I mean, it's actually fine. Like, there's nothing about this that would like read to me as broken or as problematic or as, let's go ahead and do that again. However, when I get down into there, it's just my favorite. Like, it's a little squishy here. It's a little too big here. It's just kind of uncomfortable on these sizes. And there's other ways that we could handle this, right? We could keep extrapolating out and make some different breakpoints or whatever. But we've actually got these notes from the client, set the designer on this. And now we've got this concept of like, we've got a card in a grid, and that's going to look one way. And then we've got our card in a single column, and that's going to look significantly different. But we obviously can't change the markup because this is just about screen size. We're not going to change any of our actual HTML markup. We just want to change the way that this looks to the end user. So we can do that. So we're going to go into here. We've got our card. Our card itself is going to be a grid. There's some padding. We know that there's just a single column in our grid. And we've got our headline is nice and big. Our figure has this stuff. And then we're going to go into the idea of a media query. And this will be a media query. And this is one of the reasons why I'm doing this in Sass and not in CSS. You could write this in CSS, but you have to start with this media query. But in Sass, you can actually say, define this kind of nesting thing. And then, like, I want to define the concept of breakpoints. Which I think makes the code a lot cleaner, in my opinion. We're going to define our sort of column. In this case, rather than like this single column, we're going to say, I actually want you to do 3 columns. Set a font size. We'll get back to that in just a sec. And then I've got my figure. In this case, instead of being offset, my image being offset on the top, like this one is, we're going to be offsetting it on the left. So all of that kind of defined, and our grid's sort of realigned. Now we've got like this layout. So we have our same grid layout that we had before, but now once we start to scroll down to like our single card layout, like things start to look significantly different. And we could be doing that a bunch of stages. And we could be doing that even toggled by a bonus CSS class. We could say that like we've got these, these blog posts, and all of them are equal except for this one's sponsored. So they want it to be bigger and more flashy or whatever. And we can just add that one class and go to that class, use the same markup, but just do these extra things to make it a little bit fancier. The amount of times that you can just not have to different markup to like siblings is really, really valuable. And the amount of situations, especially with CSS Grid, that you can just use the exact same markup and just write bespoke CSS rules gets you, okay, well the client says now we want to alternate every card. So the first one is on the left, second one is on the right, but every other card, we actually want to swap around the author and dates? I mean, okay, should we, I mean, on the one hand, I want to like email them because that request is insane. But shit, let's take it as a technical challenge. Okay, so we've got a card in the grid, that hasn't moved at all. We've got a card in a single column, that is the same as we've seen before, but now we've got this other thing. And like, we've got this situation where the image moves from left to right. I get where you were going there. But then you want to move around all of this stuff? I mean, if this weren't an intellectual exercise to present at a conference, that would be an insane request. But instead, it is exactly fucking that. So we've got our card, and we're going to just define the concept of nth child. In the concept of CSS, you have a lot of different ways you can define an nth child. You can say like nth 3, and that'll be like the third in this container. You can say nth child 3 plus or 3n, meaning like every third. 3n plus 1 means like every third, but like start at the second. And then we've just got the concept of like even odd. So we're doing even right here. We're going to say grid template columns, and then we're going to say, okay, if it's a an even one, change it instead of being like small, bigger, to bigger, smaller. And then we want to just move around the order. Like one of the very, very cool things, and this is available both in Grid and Flexbox, and is so incredibly valuable in my opinion, is that you can take, again, the like markup, the exact same markup, and you can just reshuffle things. You can say, this div, even though in the actual markup is down here, I want you to just sort of move this stuff around based on silly, silly whims. The one thing that I will say about this, use this kind of method like all of the time, is when you're defining order, don't stop, because the default value is 0. So if you start to define, like, I've got this div, and I want to move this thing around, so I'm going to define 1, 2, 3. Anything that you didn't define is actually out of your order. So make sure that you're actually defining all of these divs or any sort of element, like with order, that you're defining all of those orders to keep yourself, I don't want to say sane, but you know, somewhere close to that. Having done that, now we have our grid-based layout, and that is looking just fine. And then when we go down to here, we've got this situation of like the very silly requests. We've got left, right, left, right, left, right. And again, all with the exact same HTML markup. Okay, all of these are links, but we actually don't have a hover action in there for our actual card. So we want to make it that, like, you know, when you hover on that card, the image is going to get bigger, and like maybe the card itself grows. I don't know. Like we want some finesse. We want some splash. We want some nice big old hover effects. Some really incredibly unsubtle hover effects. Okay, well, let's get Jeff to do this, because Jeff can do this. And Jeff's going to define this, first of all, with a transform to say, like, everything that transforms is going to be on a 300 millisecond easing. And then Jeff is going to say the margin top, the margin left, and the margin right are all going to be negative 20 pixels. And having done that little bit of code, we've got a bad hover effect. This is going to serve the request, but not in a way that anyone really wants. Because by doing these negative margins, we're actually changing a whole bunch of DOM layout that's happening. So even the very concept of like text is going to be changing the wrap. The browser has to do so much recalc that, you know, even with a pretty good graphics card, which this laptop does not have, you're going to have jank because it has to do a whole bunch of recalc in a very, very short amount of time, and it's not going to do a great job with it. Plus, your general idea of, like, I mean, look at this, right? Our general idea of like what a consistent layout looks like is gonna get like pretty messed up. So to that end, I want to talk about transform. If you are animating in general in CSS, the best things to animate are colors and transforms. Anything where you're actually animating something like a padding or a margin, whatever. I mean, I'm not saying it's illegal. You can definitely do it, but it can be problematic. Transforms are not problematic because they're actually on the render state of something that can be moved without actually changing page flow. There's a lot of them. For example, like we can translate on the x-axis, on the y-axis, on both of those. We can translate on the z-axis because like 3D on the web is a thing that actually exists. We can translate scale, or so that we can make something bigger, but maybe only on the X or maybe on the Y or maybe on both. We can rotate a thing, something that I was doing a whole lot for like any of those social icons, like you'd hover on and go to whew. Clap my hands. We can skew, we can change perspective. I'm not going to get into this. Like, this is a thing that exists, and there's cool stuff there, but like that is a talk onto itself. But therefore, we can actually take this, and we're going to change these transforms that Jeff wrote. We're going to turn them into something that's actually safe. So we're going to say that we're going to give this a box shadow, and I want to give this a transform of I want to just transition the transform there. Then I'm going to change the shadow, and I'm going to say, okay, we're going to transform this to be basically 108 its original size, and I want to change the Z index. I'm doing that specifically because I want to make sure that like whichever card I'm actually hovering over is going to be the one that's in front. So we didn't have the situation where like you're hovering on it, it's getting bigger, but it's actually still behind the other things. Better hover effect. It is again a presentation for a conference, which means it is still unsubtle. But we do have this concept where our actual card jumps out. It jumps out and it goes up and the shadow changes. So if we concept, we can see that our shadow increases. Our shadow gets over the elements that are underneath it. Crucially, we're not ever changing the layout, which is the thing that starts to get really destructive when you're doing changes to width or padding or margin or something like that. Is like if you have an animation that affects any of those, you're going to change that layout, and that's going to start to feel pretty bad. I got another design for you to look at. Here we go. This is something that somebody's going to be sending, somebody like myself, a whole bunch of time, which we have the concept of like desktop view, we've got the concept of our mobile view, and in those cases, we've got different text sizes. There's a lot of ways to handle this, and a lot of them require way too much typing and way too many edge cases. And so to that end, I just want to introduce you here to Clamp. And Clamp is going to be a thing that I do it all of the time for font sizes, but you can do it for kind of any measure you like. And that is basically just the definition of 3 different values. We're going to say we've got our baseline value first. So let's say we have a baseline value of, in this case, 2.5 VW, meaning like 2.5% of the width we want to be a letter. But we're going to say, but I want to say that you're not allowed to be less than 20 pixels. You're not allowed to be more than 68 pixels, something like that. So we're going to define this in the concept of our article. So once again, we have this concept of like a max width of 66 ch to make sure that we don't have these like crazy line lengths that become unreadable. Margin left, margin right. And then I'm going to define some font sizes here. So like our H1 is going to say this is a minimum of 32. This is a baseline of like 4.7 VW and a top line of 76. So if my screen is very, very, very big, 76 is the biggest it'll ever be. It'll be only as small as 32, and then in the middle is where it's going to have that like nice squish zone. This is obviously, when you look at numbers like 4.7, 8, these are feels-based numbers, right? These are situations where you're looking at a design and you're kind of playing with it in like 2.4, no, 2.5, right? Which is great. Like define those, especially if you have like fixed designs that are delivered in pixels, then you have those baselines to work with. Because you can say like, well, I know what the minimum is. I know what the maximum is. The medium thing will never be delivered to you in a time. So you get to kind of like play squeeze box with your website and go, this seems right-ish. So in this case, and more DJ Khaled, and in this case, we've got our, this is the largest that our text will ever get. This is the smallest our text will ever get. But then in the middle, we can see that our text is actually going to grow with the page. So we can hold on to the kind of like general idea of basic typography in order to consistently deliver what we're looking for, even if we don't know what our viewports are going to look like, because you never will. Oh, we need a form. We need a form. Well, that's a big old topic, and only got a little bit of time for that topic, so shit, I don't think I can go through the concept of a form. Oh, okay. Well, oh, yeah. All right, Jeff. You got this, Jeff. That's awesome. Thanks for looking out, buddy. Let's see what you... You're making my life harder, Jeff, at every fucking step. There are so many examples of why this is bad. For example, like placeholder as label. Nope. never acceptable. The very concept of like unlabeled, what even is this? We've got our checkboxes, and then we've got this option. Okay, I mean, I can't go through all of this stuff, but what I can say is that people forget a lot about the actual concept of a focus state. So I'm over here, and I'm a person form, and that form has like 55 fields, and I want to be able to hit tab because that's how people are going to be kind of interacting with a form with a whole bunch of fields. If you think about hover state, but you leave focus state off, people are going to lose track of that thing. So there's Jeff's form. Nope, don't like it. We're going to go into this thing instead. So we're going to say we've got a label, and that's going to wrap. So that's going to say that like anything inside of that label is our focus area. All of our hovers and all of our focus will be trapped there. And then we have the input itself plus the actual text label of what we want to put in there. Then our CSS is going to say, I mean, this is sort of like layout stuff that doesn't matter a whole bunch. But we're going to say, okay, if you hover over this label here, I want the color to turn blue. And I also want the input and select, I want those borders to turn blue. And then for the inputs and select, if those inputs and selects are focused on, if I tab over into them, then I want you to do those same rules to the border and the nearby field label. So in that, there are some other things that we've also improved here. But one of the things that we've improved is the idea that like when I tab through, I no longer am losing track of where I'm actually at on the form. We've also used stuff like, for example, like input type date, because it's 2023, you will never need a date picker again in your life. There is no reason to ever choose a date picker. Input type date does it natively. Your browser can handle it. It's fantastic. Password input type file. And then this is the one that's like controversial, but I kind of like it still, which is the input type number, because you can kind of like do this stuff, but you can kill that spinner if you want. And also like, did you need to? You know, like, did you have a reason to ask my gender? Because if not, don't. It's a simple option. Oh God, speed round. All right, cool. All right. We got all the time. So here's our speed round. First of all, we're going to look at the iframe. We've got a situation where we've got an article, and there's going to be a YouTube video inside of that. And the YouTube video has a certain aspect ratio that we need to preserve, but obviously we want to make it so the page that the YouTube video is on is going to be responsive. Well, that's another way to do this that was popular for a very long time, was like you would put the actual iframe inside of a div, and then you would like make it position absolute, and then do some like really hacky padding, which it totally works. I've absolutely written that code. But another way to do this is just like, well, what's the actual aspect ratio of my iframe? If I say that my aspect ratio of my iframe is 16:9, and that line only, then I'll have a situation where I really like this guy, folding ideas, very, very fun. But you know, we article, and then our article has like a YouTube video embed in it, but obviously that needs to maintain its aspect ratio no matter how big the container is. But because we defined the aspect ratio as 16:9 in the CSS, then I've never done that small before. That's fun. Then our aspect ratio is always going to be kept the same. You know, there's the question of like, do you know what your aspect ratio is? And if you don't, then there's other things that you have to do. But really valuable, especially as a one-line piece. We've got the concept of position sticky. Another thing that like, you don't ever have to write JavaScript to attach something to a page. That's just not necessary anymore. It will never be necessary anymore. You can do it, obviously. But if we've got the situation where we've got, for example, our content, and our content has a rail, like we've got like a FAQ, and the FAQ is nice and big, but then there's like little breadcrumby kind of things that we want to scroll down to, but the breadcrumb is always supposed to stay there. We can do that with position sticky. We're going to say position sticky, and then the top is going to be like anchored to whatever point. So having done basically just that line 3 there, we can have a situation where we've got our hero, and then we've got our like headline going down to these anchor points. And once this blue bit, which is position sticky, once this blue bit finds the maximum that it's allowed to be up in the page, we're going to scroll, just going to lock in place. We can go ahead and just like click around through here. That thing remains locked in place. Clicking around is a little weird because we have like an iframed in example. But we're going to get that thing sort of like always stuck to the position that it is, but then of course back up, that's going to go back to being a position relative element. Position sticky, always worth it. Another thing here is the concept of clip paths. There's a lot of ways to do that with polygons, with ellipses, with insets, with just an SVG element and saying, convert that SVG element out to our actual clip path. But whichever way you want to do it, you can do stuff like this. We've got the situation of like, we've got this like big old top nav, but like we want to like just not, bite a notch. You could fake this with like, an SVG that was a background that like had this. But we can actually just say, I want to define a clip path to my div and let it crop like that. We can do stuff like, parallels. This is very fashionable right now as sort of like different parallelograms and like even, arrows. Like, hey, we can also just do this with images. Like all of these are just like regular old JPEGs, right? Regular old rectangles, but we're just going to define the concept of circles and squares and arrows and stars and whatnot. All possible. We can combine that actually with the concept of a shape outside. So if we have our clip pathed like element, and we want to say, okay, I want you to wrap some text around that, then we can do that by just defining. We've got a float, we've got the concept of padding, and then we're just going to define using the exact same rules that we used right up here in the clip path. We're going to use those same rules to go, okay, now just wrap this text around. And in so doing, we've got like these divs that are sort of offset, and then we're just going to float our text around like these sort of like more complicated, oh, hey, it's DJ Khaled, how you doing? But we can kind of like do these sort of like complicated floats without a whole lot of work, honestly. You just kind of like define sort of a red circle and then just sort of float stuff around. What was my next? Oh, yeah. Where do we go from here? There's a whole bunch of places to go, and I recognize the speed at which I've been clocking through these things. And so maybe some of these things were familiar to you, maybe some of these things were unfamiliar to you. That's fantastic. Learning is part of the deal. So you can just get cooking. Number one would be a complete guide to CSS Grid. I find this thing really super useful. CSS tricks, as it turns out, a good place for tricks about CSS. But this thing was written by, I think, was drawn by Lynn and Tom. And it's got all of the sort of like use cases for the concept of a grid. You have the grid container, the holding element, and the elements inside. And all of those have different syntaxes. And those syntaxes have confused me many times. And so like having kind of like this as a one sheet, I know kind of what I'm trying to do with grid, but how do I get here? That syntax is really good. There's also the exact same thing for Flexbox. These are basically like a web page, kind of in a poster format. So you can get these resources offhand. Know what you can be doing with a grid or with a Flexbox. It's just the way to massage the syntax to get it there. Bennett Feely's Clippy is something that I've used so often. Let me make sure that opens in a new window. But we have our concept here of like what I was showing you before of like we've got our image and we just want to clip in that image. So I can kind of start by going, well, okay, let's go ahead and take a right chevron. And that's going to give me like these amount of points. And then if you look down here in the bottom, you can see that like we have this vector that gets defined with our shape. And the dots of that vector, the color, it points to the actual color that I'm grabbing. So I can kind of like see that these are all sort of percentage based. So if this thing was like really, really wide and didn't have the same perspectives, it wouldn't matter because we're working in percentages. So I can kind of like define this shape of the actual clip path that I want to go with, and then basically just copy paste that exact line of code, and I'm good to go. And again, that shape the exact same way. So you're able to define like, here's an element that I want you to clip following these rules. That's right up there. And here's an element I want you to clip, and then you can just do a shape outside using that exact same geometry. Also, the Sass documentation I find really, really super good. One of the things I really like about the Sass documentation is how well it describes how to do partials. Breaking Sass into a whole bunch of partials ends up making a whole lot of sense, but only if that organization doesn't suck. And so defining like, you know, what's a component, what's a mixed, what's a variable, just sort of those things sensibly is a big part of the Sass documentation, as well as, you know, fancier little functions that you don't know about. This talk, holy shit, this talk inside of this talk inside of this talk. That's super meta, Lemon, except for you changed the color after you did the screenshot. So not perfect on the execution. C-, Lemon. ahoylemon.github.io, pure Sass. I write all my talks in something called review. Yes. So if you need to come back here, we'll take you there. I hope that it helps you out. And also, you can just hit me up. I am available for training, mentoring, advice. I got an email. I technically have a Twitter, but I haven't looked at it in a year. I have a Mastodon too, but like Sessionize, GitHub, and like find me. I'm around. You know, we want to talk about CSS. It's sad, but I don't get bored of that. So you can talk to me about CSS all you like. And with that extent, my name is Lemon. I hope you've had a lovely time. You can applaud now.